All right, good morning. Man, that's how you worship right there. That was awesome. That was great, wasn't it? Yeah. You guys look great. Love seeing so much Bills gear, a lot of jerseys. Might be a new record for jerseys today. I love seeing that. But I need like a little bit of time where I don't think about the game, something that I have absolutely no control over. So I'm going to put that aside for a little bit. We're going to continue our soul care series. Feeling alone is a part of the human condition. It's not a fun or enjoyable part of it, but it's definitely a relatable part, and it is apparently a really great part to sing about, based on the music over the course of several generations. Only a few of you will remember in 1949 when Hank Williams was so lonesome that he could cry. Well, that was Hank Williams Sr., right? Not even Hank Williams Jr. Some more of you will remember in 1960 when Roy Orbison sang that only the lonely knew the way that he felt. The Beatles looked at all the lonely people and they wondered where they all came from, including, of course, Eleanor Rigby and Father Mackenzie. If you were born in the 1900s, like I was, and not the 2000s, then you know that Bobby Vinton was Mr. Lonely long before Akon was. Billy Joel saw people sharing a drink called loneliness, but he knew that it was better than drinking alone. If we move forward a few decades, Celine Dion found herself all by herself. The Backstreet Boys asked someone to show them the meaning of being lonely. Green Day walked a lonely road in the Boulevard of Broken Dreams. In 2018, Martin Garrix and Dua Lipa were scared to be alone. And even the most famous person in the world right now, Taylor Swift, she sang The Outside about how she feels like she's always on the outside looking in. Right? And I do hope in a few hours Taylor's on the outside of the AFC Championship game looking in. We're not charismatic till you bring up the Bills. What does that say? Like people are like, this is a good sermon. And you bring up the Bills and then, whatever. All right, let's go. So if today's soul care topic, if it relates to you, you are not alone. And it's I feel alone. Now, I just want to say, for some of you, this is an area where you're good, right? Sometimes you're like, man, come to church and I've got to go home and I got something I really need to work on. And this might just kind of be a good reminder for you to continue to prioritize this. But we're going to talk about some things and you might be saying, hey, I'm doing okay in this area. And if you are, that's great. I want to encourage you, but I also want to make sure you continue to make that a priority. Because depending on where you are in your life right now, what age and stage you're in, you will either be shocked or maybe validated by the next quote that I'm going to show you. It's from a study on loneliness in a medical journal, the Public Library of Science Medicine. Here's what they said. Loneliness has such far-reaching consequences that the health impact is comparable to smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. Loneliness is associated with an increased risk of heart disease, depression, and cognitive decline. Listen, if you came to me and you said that you were smoking 15 cigarettes a day, I would say, this is something we need to start working on right now, right? This isn't a next year problem. This is a today problem. That's a habit that will kill you far too quickly. So we should get started with a plan of how to stop that. And so if the impact of loneliness on our health is comparable to that, we better take it pretty seriously. I'm not trying to scare you into relationships or connections today, but I do want you to see this is a serious issue. And part of the problem is that as a society, we've never been more connected, and yet at the same time, we've never had a bigger issue with loneliness. Do you remember in Back to the Future 2, Marty McFly, he sees the older version of himself video chatting with someone, and it was incredible. 9-year-old me was like blown away. Like, do you think we could actually do that? We could talk to someone on the phone, but see them while we're talking to them. Like, that's crazy. I can't imagine ever being able to do that. Well, there's an app on my phone called FaceTime. And if somebody FaceTimes me and it's not Amy or one of my kids, I'm like, what are you? I'm going to get a restraining order, right? I don't need to see your face that close and you don't need to see my face that close. And so we have more ways to connect than ever, but they're generally pretty surface level and pretty shallow. And I do want to encourage you, just especially in regards to loneliness, be very careful with social media. Social media can be a good first step to make a connection with someone, but social media is not a real, lasting, or authentic community. Don't let algorithms designed to keep you on the site or the app as long as possible determine your connections. So avoid making social media your main platform for human connection, or you'll be on the path to loneliness. What we need is real human connection. When I was a kid, I grew up in this area, but I spent the summers, 3 summers of my life in Maine with my grandparents. And looking back, they were like the best times of my childhood. I loved being up there with them, loved just having my grandparents all to myself. And one of the things I really loved was all the connection. Because my grandmother's house, that was like the main hub for everybody. So there's always coffee on. She made homemade donuts. There's always food there. And people throughout the day would just stop in. 20, 30 people, right? My dad's cousins would stop in, my aunts and uncles, my cousins, my grandfather's brothers and sisters, everyone would just stop in. Like it was a thing that they did. And they'd come and they'd sit around the table and they'd have a cup of coffee and they'd just talk about not much, truthfully, but they were just there, right? They're from Maine. They didn't talk about feelings. We can't say that. But they just talk about life a little bit. And so I remember saying to my grandmother, I love this. I love that at your house, people just come over and stop, and that's how they connect. And she said, well, what do they do in New York? She said, what do they do in New York? Because that's where she was from. And I was like, well, I guess if you wanted to check on someone, you would just call. And I remember her laughing. She's like, why would you call them when you could just go over to their house? I was like, I don't know what to tell you. And now if you tried to explain text messages to her, it's like a phone call, but I don't want to interrupt you at all. So I'll just send it and you can come back. And so technology, it gives us this feeling of being connected, but it doesn't address the actual lingering feeling of loneliness. It would be like if you were really thirsty on a hot day. Does anybody remember hot days? You remember hot days, right? Okay, we'll have some more. Feels like it's a ways off. But if you're really thirsty on a hot day and you grab like a 7-Up or a Mountain Dew, right? It's going to taste good for a little bit, but it is ultimately going to leave you even more thirsty. You get that like sugary, sweet, sticky feeling in your mouth, and you're like, man, I didn't need this. What I needed was water. Water is the right plan for addressing thirst. Well, God's plan for loneliness is authentic community. And so there's good news in there that God does have a plan for loneliness. And it's not limited to certain stages of life. It's not only for people of a particular marital status. Wherever you are, whoever you are, if you're struggling with loneliness, the answer is authentic community. Now, some of you are saying, all right, like, what is authentic community? Don't just use that phrase and not tell us a little bit. I would refer you to our core values. One of our 8 core values is that we are a relational church. We aspire to be a relational church. And if you read that definition, it says relationships that are characterized by honesty, openness, and vulnerability. Right? Honesty, openness, and vulnerability. So an authentic community is a place where you can truly be yourself and you can be known and loved as you are. And we need this. We all need to be known and loved. Yes, we need that from God, but we also need it from other human beings too. It reminds me of my favorite quote from the now late pastor Tim Keller, who said, "To be loved but not known is comforting but superficial. To be known and not loved is our greatest fear. But to be fully known and truly loved is a lot like being loved by God." So just before we get further into God's plan for loneliness, and I want to share some biblical accounts of loneliness, I just need to give one disclaimer, clarification up front, especially for the extroverts, and that is that a certain amount of being alone is healthy and helpful, okay? We do need to be alone a bit. There were times in my life where I was absolutely terrible at this. Like, it's not my natural wiring. When we took Myers-Briggs at the beginning of seminary, I was 20-0 on the extrovert to introvert scale. And I lived with 4 other guys, and so they were always around, and I was dating Amy, and it was just like, no matter what, I had somebody to be with. I could always be with someone. I never had to be by myself, and consequently, I got pretty bad at being by myself. But having kids really makes you appreciate quietness and being alone in a way that maybe you didn't before, right? There's a whole stage of life where you're like a 20-minute ride in the car by yourself is heaven, right? You're like, there's no kids, there's no one screaming, there's no one saying, "Daddy, look at this," right? That sounds amazing. And so you progress and you get a little older and you realize that maybe being alone isn't always the worst thing. And so you'll find me sitting alone in a coffee shop. I do like to go to the movies by myself. I enjoy flying by myself. I'd always rather fly with Amy, but I like to travel by myself as well. And Jesus, he consistently demonstrated this for us, that time alone is both healthy and helpful. Despite the disciples, despite the crowds that followed after him more and more once his power started to become known, Jesus prioritized time alone. Couple examples. from the Gospels. Mark 1:35, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Luke 4:42, the first half of that says, at daybreak, Jesus went out to a solitary place. Luke 5:16, but Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Jesus got this. He understood the importance of this. We should get this as well. We do need some time alone. We need time alone to pray. We need time alone to be quiet and listen to God. We need time alone to reflect. Where are my hunters, right? Any hunters here? Yeah, just a few. You guys did way better raising your hand. Thank you. Hunters get this probably better than anybody else. Because I know you love to shoot a deer, right? Or a turkey. I know you like to do that. I know you like to fill the freezer, and there's other motives, but you love to be in the quiet by yourself. Or you love to get up early when it's still dark and walk through the woods and you hear the crackling under your feet and no one's talking to you and no one's bothering you. There's no music. There's nothing else. It's just quiet, and you watch the sun come up and it's just you and God and it's nature, and you're hoping like a 12-point buck, but it might just be you, God, and nature. You get that. You get the importance and how good it is for our soul to be alone. But while being alone can be healthy and helpful, being lonely isn't. Because there is a significant difference between being alone and being lonely. At times, it can be great to be alone for a while, but at other times, you can be in a crowd and feel absolutely all alone at the same time. I think that's one of the loneliest feelings, when you're around a ton of people and you're just aware that you're completely alone in that. You can be with another person and you can feel all alone. Marriage is not an instant cure for loneliness. Unfortunately, there's a lot of married people that know that all too well. They know it better than they wish they did. You have to build authentic community even within a marriage. That doesn't magically arrive a few days after the wedding in the mail, right? The marriage license comes, but that authentic community is something you're going to have to work at and build. And even a good, strong marriage will have periods of loneliness and feeling alone. But Jesus, as much as he did prioritize being alone, and he saw the value of that, there were also a few times where he really seemed to feel the weight of being lonely. When he knows that his death is imminent, he's in the Garden of Gethsemane and he's praying, and he asks the disciples, please pray along with me. And he leaves to pray, and he comes back and he finds them asleep. And his response is one that shows he feels abandoned and he feels alone at his time of need. And then later, when the actual moment of his death comes, he feels the most alone that he's ever felt. He carries the weight of the world, the weight of the sin of the world on his shoulders. And at that moment, he feels like his Father has left him, and the loneliness in his words is palpable. In Matthew 27:46, where it says, about 3 p.m, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? Jesus, our Savior and our God, he felt forsaken. He felt abandoned. He felt alone. And he is, of course, he's not the only person in the Bible to feel that way. He's not the only one to speak to this condition or to write about this condition or reflect on it. King Solomon, he wrote about the condition of loneliness in Ecclesiastes. Verses 4, 7 through 8 is where we're going to start. Here's what he says. Again, I saw something meaningless under the sun. There's a man all alone. He had neither son nor brother. There was no end to his toil, yet his eyes were not content with his wealth. For whom am I toiling, he asked, and why am I depriving myself of enjoyment? This too is meaningless, a miserable business. He's picturing this person. Maybe it's a real person he knows. Maybe it's a hypothetical person. And this person is alone. They have no one. He works hard. He has wealth. But the hard work and the wealth, it doesn't combat the loneliness. And so finally he asks, what am I working so hard for? What is the point of all this stuff? It's meaningless. All the money, all the success, all this stuff, it's all meaningless. And some of you have reached a similar conclusion in your own life, that without authentic community and connection, life will feel meaningless. Money, power, success, none of that will remove your need for authentic community, your need for connection. In fact, you can get all those things, and what you'll find is that without someone to share them with, there really isn't much of a point. So what's Solomon's conclusion to this matter? What does he decide? Well, the next 4 verses, which we do frequently hear at weddings, but they don't only pertain to a marriage relationship, say this: 2 are better than 1. because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. Also, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. Without relationships, our accomplishments are in vain. And so what Solomon says is 2 are better than 1. He says we are better together. There's a good return for their labor. 2 can do more together than we can on our own. Have you ever tried to fold like a king-size sheet by yourself? Right? You could spend all day doing that, and you're just going to crumple it up and throw it in that basket at the end. But if you have 2 people, it's not really that hard of a task. If one person falls down, the other can help them up. If they fall, you don't have to be like the kid in Christmas Story, laying on the ground, right? Trying to get up. You can help somebody through difficult times. Together, people can keep warm. People in relationships can bring comfort to each other. They can defend themselves. Somebody can have your back. You can have someone else's back. Our safety and our security are improved by being with someone else. And what Solomon concludes is that people are made to be in community, and we are better together. Right? We're made to be in community, and we're better together. We are designed for this. Yes, we as human beings weren't just made to endure long periods of loneliness, but even more, we as Christ followers, if you are a Christ follower, we're not designed to walk this journey on our own. Christianity is a team sport. It's meant to be lived out in community with each other, not off on your own, like some kind of lone wolf Christian. That's not biblical, and it's not practical, and it doesn't end well quite often. And so maybe this is the year. Maybe 2024 is the year you really jump into group life at Northgate. You've heard about it. You've said, oh, we should do that. We're going to do that at some point. We've been meaning to do that. Make this the year that you actually do that. Do something. Take a step like coming to Pastor Vern's Digging Deeper class Monday at 6:30. Everyone that goes to that loves it. Talk to Angelique. You saw her up here. So if you didn't know her, now you know what she looks like. You won't find a more friendly person. Email her, angelique@northgatefmc.com. Her passion is getting you connected to this authentic community here at Northgate. I'm telling you, that is what keeps her going. She will tell you that it saved her life, and she would love to share her story with you and help you find the same thing. And then treat your social skills as a muscle, right? That you have to exercise, right? It might take a little work. You might have to push through, but if they're social skills, then that means there's going to be work to build and maintain them. We need to invest some time and energy in that. I know it can be really easy, especially in the winter when it's dark at like 3:30 in the afternoon, to just come home and be like, we're not going anywhere today. I get that. I feel that too, but we have to invest time and energy. We have to build those skills. We have to treat it like a muscle that needs to be worked out. And we know that because remember in COVID with 2020 when everyone had to stay home for a while, and then when people went back out in the world, like a bunch of people forgot how to behave, right? People got back on airplanes and were just like animals, and we're like, what happened? Like the muscles, the skills, they had deteriorated because we were just in our homes for a while. People didn't know how to behave in restaurants and stuff anymore. I think we're getting better. You guys did great, personally. I just want to applaud all of you. But there were other people out there that we both know that didn't know how to behave after that. So invest time and energy to that. Maybe come to church a little bit early, right? Meet some people, stick around. Maybe you don't rush out right when it's done. If you're making dinner reservations, lunch reservations, do them at 12:30 instead of 12:15 so you don't feel like you got to get out of here the second that it's done. I'll give you a challenge. I actually just saw people doing this, and it made me really happy. Get to know one person every Sunday, right? That's it. Just one person that you don't know. Just go over and say, hey, I'm John. How you doing? How long have you been here, right? Just introduce yourself and get to know one person every Sunday. If we did that, I'm telling you, it will really start to improve the culture, and it will help build more authentic community here. Well, I want to show you in our time remaining 2 accounts of people who felt alone in the Bible. They're both from the book of Genesis, and I want to look at how God addressed both of these situations. And the first one is from Genesis 21. It's the story of Hagar and Ishmael, and it comes from 8 through 21, those verses, if you want to read it later or follow along as I talk about it. Well, because Hagar and Ishmael, they're in a mess. But it's not really a mess of their own doing. There was nothing that Hagar could have done about it or done to avoid it, because God had promised Abraham that he would make him into a great nation. But Abraham and his wife Sarah, they got kind of impatient while waiting for God to fulfill that promise. So in Genesis 16, Sarah tells her husband Abraham, "You should sleep with my Egyptian slave Hagar, and perhaps you'll have a child with her, and that's how God will fulfill this promise." As if God needs them to do something like that to be able to be faithful and keep his word. But Abraham does as she suggests, and Hagar gets pregnant. And there's this immediate tension, rightfully so, between Hagar and Sarah. And Hagar, she tries to run away. She's like, "I'm out of here. I'm not dealing with this." And God tells her to go back. And she goes back and she gives birth to a son, Ishmael. Now, we have to assume the tension is still there. It's a tense situation, but we don't really hear anything else about this until Genesis 21, when Sarah finally gets pregnant, and then she gives birth to her own son, Isaac. And Sarah is thrilled, and she's amazed at God's faithfulness, at his ability to fulfill his promise in his own way without needing her intervention. But now that she has her own son, that tension between Sarah and Hagar just goes up and up. It's an all-time high. And during a party, it says Sarah sees Ishmael mocking. Now, we assume that she sees him mocking Isaac. Isaac at this point is around 3 years old, and Ishmael's 13 years older than him. So you have a 16-year-old making fun of a 3-year-old, and it doesn't go over well, right? It doesn't go over well. Now, interesting here, Ishmael would go on to become the father of the Arabic people. Isaac would become the father of the Jewish people. And so this little conflict that started at that party that day is still at play in our world today. But Sarah sees this and she tells Abraham, "Get rid of that slave woman and her son. I want them out of here. He will never share in the inheritance with my son, Isaac." And Abraham, he's torn by this. He's stressed. He cares about Ishmael, his son. But God gives him a promise. He gives him a promise that even though he will fulfill his promise through Isaac, he also will make Ishmael into a great nation as well. So early the next morning, Abraham takes some food and some water, and he sends Hagar and Ishmael out into the desert by themselves. I want to talk about feeling alone. You've got a single mom and her son and a limited amount of food and water, and they're just out in the desert. And before long, the food and the water run out, and this poor single mom out on her own, she reaches this awful point in conclusion in verses 16 to 18. Then she went off and sat down about a bow shot away, for she thought, "I cannot watch the boy die." And as she sat there, she began to sob. God heard the boy crying, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What is the matter, Hagar? Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. Lift the boy up and take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation." I just think it's interesting that we are told Hagar begins to sob, but God hears the boy crying, and that's what he responds to. But as Hagar and Ishmael are sobbing, they're crying out to God from an absolutely untenable place. What we see is that God sees us in our loneliest moments. He sees us, and he sees you today. If you're in your loneliest moment right now, he sees you. Because even though Hagar had been a slave in Abraham's household, she was in a position where her needs and the needs of her son would have been provided for. Abraham was a rich man. He had all that he needed, and the people around him had all that they needed as well. But removed from that safety and from that security, Hagar on her own, she realized she needed to cry out to someone and something even higher than Abraham. And when she did that, God was faithful. When she did that, God saw her and God comforted her. Her biggest fear was that her son was going to die, that she was going to watch him die. And God assures her, Hagar, that won't be the case. In verse 19, God opens her eyes and she sees a well of water and she's able to get the boy a drink. And in verse 20 tells us God was with him as he grew up. And none of that wouldn't have been possible if God didn't see him and see his single mom in their loneliest and most broken moment. Now, just a quick side note here about Hagar, because I think that it's important to mention somewhere in a church, in a message about loneliness, and that's that married people need to understand that the church is one of the hardest places to be a single person. Right? That's true. The church is one of the most difficult places to be single. So fellow married people, we need to be aware of this. We have to be conscious of it. I hear this regularly, yes, even here, and we pride ourselves on being a welcoming church. It's who we aim to be. It's who we hope to be. A lot of times, I think it's who we are. But if we fail in this regularly, if we're regularly unwelcoming, it is to single people. If a family of 5 comes through the doors for the first time, it's a whole lot easier to make sure that they don't slide through the cracks than if a single man or a single woman comes walking in by themselves. And it takes guts. It's hard to come into church by yourself. It really is. So just be aware of this. Keep this in mind. Try your hardest to make this a church that's welcoming for everyone, not just for people that are in your same family structure or stage of life as you. Okay, well, second account from Genesis 28, 10-17. This is about Jacob's dream at Bethel. Now we fast forward a little bit and we're in the same family. This is now Isaac's son, Jacob. And he also has found himself isolated and alone. The dysfunction that Abraham had sowed into his family is continuing in future generations. And so when Isaac is old and he's close to death, he calls for his son Esau to be brought to him so that he can give him his blessing before he died. And this was something that was reserved for the oldest son. And it was something that was not only meaningful, it was also really profitable. It was his blessing. It was his power. It was his inheritance. It was the whole deal. But Isaac's wife, Rebekah, she overhears him telling Esau to get ready for the blessing, and so she sneaks her favorite son Jacob in instead to steal that blessing. And Esau, he's understandably upset. Esau is not the kind of guy that you mess with. And so when his dad dies, he's so mad about the stealing of the blessing that he says, I am going to kill my brother. And it's important. This isn't like when you said you're going to kill your brother, right? He's not going to chase him down and like give him like a noogie or a Charlie horse. He's going to literally murder his brother. And so Jacob's got to get out of there. He has to run away. He heads out completely alone. Just like Hagar, but for different reasons, he's left this circle of wealth and security. And he gets to a spot to stop for the night. And verse 11 says he took one of the stones there and he put it under his head and he laid down to sleep. Sometimes I read a verse and it reminds me how glad I am to live when I do, right? When I put my head on a memory foam pillow and not a rock at night. But he's got a rock and he apparently sleeps well because he's sleeping and he has this dream in which he sees a stairway going from earth up to heaven. And he wakes up and he pens the lyrics that Led Zeppelin would record in 1970. Not true. But on top of that stairway, at the top of heaven, God is standing there and this is what he tells him. I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like dust of the earth. They will spread out to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south, and all the people of the earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I'm with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I promised you. In the loneliest place and position that Jacob's ever been in his life, God breaks into his dreams to remind him that he is with him, that he is for him, that he has a plan for him, that he has a promise for his life, despite how it seems at the moment. And Jacob's response, I love what Jacob says back. He awoke from his sleep and he thought, surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it. God is there when we feel the most alone, even when we aren't aware of it. He's there even when we aren't aware of it. Jacob knew very well that he was alone, but he wasn't aware that God was with him in that place. And if you came here today and you're feeling that and you're wrestling and you're struggling with feeling alone, I hope that the words of Jacob will become your words. Surely the Lord is in this place and I was not aware of it. Surely the Lord is in my house and I was not aware of it. Surely the Lord is in my apartment and I was not aware of it. Surely the Lord is in your office and you were not aware of it. Surely the Lord is in your car and you were not aware of it. Surely the Lord is here with us right now and you were not aware of it. Because loneliness is a real thing. It is a significant problem. It's a real issue. And if you feel alone, you are not alone in feeling alone. It's a real threat to your health and to your well-being, but God's plan for our loneliness is authentic community. We all need it. We all need to seek it. We all need to cultivate those relationships, and we all need to seek him, and we need to realize that he's in this place even when we aren't aware of it. Because, and I've said this to people regularly, if you want to be here and not be known, you will be able to do that. You'll be able to pull it off. If it's your goal, you just say, hey, I just want a place to be for an hour and I feel better after the singing and I listen to somebody talk and I go out and that's it. If you want to do that, you can pull it off. But if you do that, you're missing out an authentic community that God is hardwired for you to need in your life. And I'm telling you, I would, Pastor Vern, Pastor DL, any other pastor or staff member would love to help you begin to find that, to begin that journey today. It will not happen in an instant, but I promise you, if you don't ever start seeking it, you will never find it. Let's pray. Father God, thank you for your presence, Lord, in our lives, and your presence with us here right now. Lord, I pray that that presence would be so real to people, Lord, especially people that did not know that you were here, that were not aware of your presence, Lord, that you would just make yourself known and felt to them in this moment. God, I pray that we would be people who work on and seek authentic community. God, that we would invest in that, that we would go after it. And Lord, I pray that as we do that, Lord, you would reward the effort that we put in. Lord, for people, maybe they felt like they tried, they put themselves out and it didn't work and they gave up. God, I pray you'd give them a push to do that again, Lord, and that we would have these kind of relationships in our lives. In Jesus' name, amen. I want to give you the takeaway. Oh, I messed it up. It's on me, Rick. It's not on you. And that's whether you feel alone or not. It's gone right now. Our need for authentic community is the same. So seek it, invest it, and value it.
Good morning, church. So who believes that God works all things together for his glory and his name? Amen. Me too. You're a wonderful church. You're a great congregation. And that just makes what I need to tell you all the much harder. Over the past year, I have been sensing very clearly from the Lord that it's time for me to retire. So at the end of July, I will be retiring as your senior pastor. But I want you to know how difficult this is for me, because just what Pastor John was talking about, it's so true of Northgate. We have such strong relationships, and you have loved me so well and encouraged and supported me so well as your senior pastor. And that makes this difficult. But again, I just know it's right. I've been in prayer about it for some time. I'm not going for any negative reasons. It's not because of anything untoward. It's not for anything bad. It's church is in a wonderful place. I'm so encouraged by all of you. I have a great staff. I work with a great partner. In fact, a year or so ago, I began to talk with Mark about my retirement, and that I was sensing God calling me to that. And Mark let me know that he had been sensing the same release from the Lord. He committed to stay with me until my retirement. So Mark is going to be here as director of operations until the end of July as well, but then he will be retiring. We will be retiring together. And I think you got something to say, right?
I'd just like to say to the congregation, you are family. And I just started my 17th year here. When I started, I didn't anticipate staying 17 years at Northgate. But it's been the best job that I've ever had. And working alongside Vern has been such a wonderful blessing for the last 10 years. I told the last service, every day has been a blessing working with this man, except for one. And that one day was necessary and got us both on the right track. The Lord knew what we needed to do. But it's been a pleasure partnering with him. It's been a pleasure serving this congregation. You have seen me through the most difficult days of my life. The last 4 years have been really hard. Losing my wife and then going through grief. And I owe you a huge, huge debt of gratitude that I will never be able to repay. But I just want you to know how much I love you and appreciate you. And thank you for the opportunity to serve here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You're not making this any easier. Thank you. Thank you. Really, thank you so much. Go ahead and have a seat again. This is Superintendent Pam Brayman. She is the superintendent of the Genesis Conference, of which we are a part, and she just wants to say a word about the process going forward.
So I'm glad you stood, because I have been very blessed by both of these men. And I was telling Vern after the last service, I said, a lot of times I'm stepping into transitions when there's a crisis. So it's a good thing, because I know this may be surprising to you this morning, but it's not surprising to me or to our Ministerial Appointments Committee. We have been talking to Vern for quite a long time, and we're ahead on this. And I met with the board this past week. You've got a great board here too. You really do. Yeah. And they are spiritually mature and prayerful and asking good questions and bringing up good things. And so I have great confidence in the process that we're going to be going forward with in order to find to place a new lead pastor here. So thanks.
Yeah, there is a sheet on the information desk if you want more specifics about this process going forward. Please pick one up. If you want to communicate with any of our administrative team, specifically the delegates, about this process, their contact information is on that sheet so that you can get a hold of them. Would you join me in prayer? Well, Jesus, this is your church, and it's our privilege to serve you here, all of us as your people that you have called into relationship with yourself, people that you have given a vision and a mission to, and we desire to do that faithfully, and we want to continue to do that faithfully long into the future, Lord. So please keep us in the palm of your hand, keep us close to your heart. Lord, keep us faithful so that you are able to bless the things that we do. We praise you for the fellowship that we have with one another. We thank you for the lives that have been changed through Northgate and will be changed through Northgate. We thank you for all of the good things that come from this place. And we, again, just pray that you will help us to continue our focus on the mission, to bring people to know you, Jesus, to build them up in their relationship with you and send them out to share your love. That's what this is all about, and it's our joy to join you in it. Praise you, Lord, for all of it. Amen. Would you please stand for the benediction? The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace. God bless.